got some more questions, and always happy to try and answer them. Tianyi, you might have to just remind me what you were, just in a moment, okay? Now, just to recap on the dividend pass-through, now I know that when you see a term like that, it is easy to think, oh, that means, you know, the dividend goes up unexpectedly, and then you pay some money to the CB investor. Okay, now that is not a dividend pass-through, although I think it's a very uncommon way of doing that. Okay, you don't pay, the dividend pass-through normally does not mean you make a physical payment to compensate. It is compensation, but it's compensation in terms of doing something to the call option itself. All right. Now, call option. Now, the first thing you need to understand is that when dividend goes up, the share price goes down. That's the first thing you need to understand. And not only that, the call option price also goes down. Okay, that's the first thing to remember. And the second thing is, well, this is what the CB investors are afraid of. So how do you compensate that? Well, you ask yourself, under what circumstance does that go up? That is when you change the strike. I know it's a very drastic step to take, and normally call strikes don't change, but you can change it. So if you change from 97 to 95, so your call price would jump from 864 to 950. Now, somebody was asking me, why would you do that? Why would you do that as an issuer? First of all, it results in better pricing terms. Now, what that means is it makes your CB more attractive. Just think of it, okay? Think of it that way. What does it mean? Better pricing terms. For issuer. What does that mean? Okay, it simply means the CB is a more attractive investment. It's a more attractive proposition. So therefore, you can probably sell it either for a higher price, okay, or to a bigger audience, or whatever it is, it's better for me. So now I have more negotiating or bargaining power because I have a product that you want, that you find attractive. That's all it means, okay? Now, some people who were asking me, why would you do that as an issuer? Once, if you are an issuer, if you are a borrower, and you issue a bond, just a straight bond, vanilla bond, okay? And you have to pay 3% coupon. Why do you pay 3%? Why not 2? Why not 1? You pay 3% because that's what the market wants, because of the supply and demand. This is where people will start to get interested. It's the same for any commercial deal you want to do. So someone was asking me, why would you do that? You do that because if you don't do that, maybe investors are not interested. That is the reason for you to do anything, isn't it? Yeah? Is if you think that you may have difficulty selling your bond, or you want to make it better, okay? So you start putting in these little features. It's like a car. You sell a car, then there is electric windows, and there's an air con, and there's an airbag. Okay, hopefully you never have to use the airbag, but it's there. This is kind of, yeah, that's a good example. Okay, for instance, you are the issuer, and normally you pay a 5% dividend every year, let's say. Okay, so you promise your CB investors, if at any point in time I pay a dividend more than 5%, then I promise you we will adjust the call strike. It has to be defined very clearly. Okay? So let's say next year I pay a 7% dividend, okay? Then I would allow for a 2% adjustment downward on the strike price. Let's say you do that, okay? And guess what? In your mind, you are the issuer. You don't even intend to pay a 7% dividend. That's what I meant by the airbag example. Okay, it's just there to make your deal more attractive, but it might not actually be needed. Okay. Jenny, what were the questions you were asking me just now? Yes. Now, so like I was saying, when you are trying to hedge the different elements of a convertible bond. So one thing that you can use to hedge your credit risk of the corporate is what's called a credit default swap. Now, this is a credit derivative, and there is a course actually devoted to that next term if you are interested. The CDS is an instrument. So credit default swap. Now, it's an instrument you can use to hedge the risk of General Electric or Boeing or Alibaba, whatever company, McDonald's. There's a market out there. It is, in a way, kind of like an insurance. So when you take out, although that's a rather misleading way to describe it sometimes. So when you buy a CDS contract, you have to pay a premium, first of all. And that market itself sometimes is not all that liquid. So if the issuer is actually a very small company and it's not well known, you may not be able to find someone on the other side. So when the liquidity of the CDS market is good, generally investors like that. Otherwise, they don't. So this is something they would factor in. If you are, Johnny's Pizza down the road and you issue a CB, so the investors might think, oh, well, can I actually hedge your credit risk or not? Because there may not even be a market for your company to hedge out the credit risk. Okay? You had another question. Investor put. Yeah. Investor put. Now, there are different types. I'll give you two. This is actually when you buy a bond and you are allowed to put that bond back to the issuer. And one example is the change of control put. The other is sometimes called a delisting put. Now, what are these things? So this is when the investor actually has the right to put the bond back to the company and ask for the par value if there has been a change of control. In fact, guess what? Someone else asked a question about poison pills. This is precisely it. Okay? So you see the benefit of sharing questions is quite often a lot of them are related. So if control changes and I'm a bondholder, I have the right to go to the company and say, excuse me, I'd like to have my money back now. Please give me back my $100, even if the bond has not actually matured yet. Okay? Which is a good thing to have. Is that okay, Tianyi? It is the right of the investor. Yeah. Okay, she's asking whether the investor needs to pay for this or not. Now, let me answer this question. So she's asking, does the investor need to pay? The way you, for example, the way you would pay for the call option in a CB, for instance. Now, nothing is free in this world. So if you compare two bonds which are identical, but one of them has this feature and the other one does not, of course I'm going to choose the one that has this feature, which means the yield is likely to be lower, number one. Okay. Point number two is even though this feature will cost you money, I suspect you cannot price it like a put option. You can't, because it's concerning someone actually taking or control changing. It's got not much to do with the share price. So it's not something that you can really put a price on. So it's really, supply and demand. Okay. So is that okay? Yeah. Now let me get on with. I have a question regarding CB. For an RMB denominated US settled CB, how it works. Thank you. How it works is like this. So CB, so there are two aspects to it. So first of all, there's the denominated currency, and then there's a settlement currency. This is actually a lot simpler than you think. Now, the risk mostly lies with the denomination. Okay, so for example, so let's say denomination is in renminbi, but settlement is in US dollars. And I think in the old days, this used to happen quite a lot, but maybe not so much now. Now, all that means is, so you think about this. So this is the issuer, and this is the investor. Ladies and gentlemen, this is actually not a complex, this is not a complicated topic, okay? So don't think it's complicated. And let's say at the start, so they buy a bond, they buy a CB, and they pay they need to pay renminbi, all right, and they were thinking to invest 6.5 million in this bond in renminbi, okay, because the denomination is in renminbi. But guess what? They don't have that money in renminbi. So they look at what is the FX rate at the start, and let's say it is 1 US to 6.5 RMB. I know it's not, but never mind. Let's just say it is. Okay. Then in the beginning, they will give the issuer. Now this is at the start. At the start. Okay. So what are they going to give the issuer? So the CP is still the same. It doesn't even have to be a CP, it can be any bond. They're just going to give them 1 million, aren't they? Because I already told you that is the exchange rate. Okay, now you scroll back, no, scroll forward. Imagine it's now maturity. Maturity. And then the issuer will tell the investor, well, look, now you want to redeem your bond, and I know I have to pay you back 6.5 million because that was what you invested in. The fact that you pay me $1 million US, well, that is just for settlement purposes at the start. So what we're going to do now for the issuer is let's try and figure out. So now we look at the FX, but at maturity with a capital T. So maybe now $1 US can only buy 5 renminbi. Let's just say 5. Okay. Then you can simply work out, well, I need to pay you more. And I would use a different color. So I don't pay you 6.5 million in renminbi. I'm just going to pay you. Is this a different color? Seems like it's the same color. Oh, here you go. So I don't pay you 6.5 million. I'm going to pay you US dollars. Do I pay you more or less than $1 million in US? I have to pay you, I think, around 1.3. Okay, because 1.3 million would be equivalent to, if you multiply that by 5. So now this is renminbi denominated, US dollar settled. Now it can be US dollar settled, it can be settled in yen, it can be settled in Swiss franc, in pounds, in Bitcoin, in oranges if you want to. Okay? At that moment in time, at maturity. You know what I'm saying? So settlement is just, it can be settled in gold if you want. It can be settled in, Mercedes or BMWs. Well, it'll be a lot of Mercedes. Are you with me? Yeah? So that is just a transaction medium, if you like. Okay? Okay, so good evening. I have some comments. Why do you consider secondary inclusion retain holdings key to messaging? Lecture 2, slide 3. Okay, let me go there. I think for those of you who have done Chinese equity market, You may know what that means. So lecture 2, slide number 3. This is related to selling secondary shares. So we already said that when you have a follow-on offering, so you've already done your IPO and now you want to sell more shares. You are already a company trading in the market. Now there are two ways you can do that. You can either get some new capital, new money, so you issue new shares and people will pay you cash for it. That would be follow-on offering of primary shares, shares that never even existed in the past. That's one way. The other way is if you just sell, if a major shareholder actually sell, now that is also a follow-on offering. You have to understand for the second part, it doesn't change the balance sheet of the company whatsoever. All it changes is the ownership. So what happens is that the major shareholder, in their pocket, they have less shares and more money. That's what that means, okay? And in a follow-on offering, if this is all that you are doing and you sell a lot of it and you don't issue any new shares, you just sell your holdings, investors are going to think, wow, what are you doing? So you don't have confidence in your company anymore. So you just want to sell out. A few years ago, there was a company called Li-Ning. I think it's still around. People are laughing. I don't know, it may not be the sexiest brand around. And I think that was what he did. He sold some of his holdings and people were asking, why are you doing that? If you look at the Prada, in fact, that happened in an IPO. That wasn't even a follow-on offering. In the Prada IPO, so for the first time they came to the market, it was exclusively just selling a part of the major share. So it would not raise any new money. Now, when you do that, you are really sending a different signal to investors. So you're not raising money for new projects. You're not attracting new investors. You are just, adjusting your ownership. Okay, so are you retaining some of your ownership? That's what it means. Okay. How will increase of U.S. Treasury yield affect domestic Chinese bond market? When I was doing my intern in Chinese secondary bond market, well, lucky you, it seemed everyone was talking about the potential increase in U.S. interest rates, and they seem to be quite pessimistic. Well, if you've been following the news, there was a sell-off in the U.S. Treasury market as recently as yesterday. You type U.S. Treasury bond sell-off. In fact, it knows what I'm thinking. In the Financial Times, there was a story of this. Well, my answer, actually, this is kind of related to our opening question. Now, this is the US. This is America. So the US, they have a yield curve. And China has a yield curve, it would look different. The numbers will be different. Unfortunately, whether you like it or not, the US government bond market is a major driver for US borrowing costs, but it's also a driver for global borrowing costs. Now, with a lot of Americans, you think, why do I care? Unfortunately, you have to care because it's a huge market, and the US dollar being almost like a reserve currency, they do have substantial impact. Their market is big, okay? So don't look at the US as just a country on its own, but as part of, you are talking what? You're talking global markets, global capital markets. So what happens in one place has an impact somewhere else, okay? I still cannot figure why after taking the course. Yeah, well, when the yields of U.S. government bonds go up, it tends to influence the yields of other countries as well. Okay. All right. Good afternoon. I'm writing to ask questions about corporate hybrid. For Google, hybrid is a range of debt instruments that lies somewhere between debt and equity. Then from my perspective, it's something like a convertible bond. If my understanding is correct, why the coupon of CB is lower than straight bonds, while that of corporate hybrid is higher. I guess I do not understand the concept well. Okay, there is a reason for that. You probably guessed by now. Now, this person might be thinking that when you have a balance sheet, so there's equity down there. So there's senior secure, senior unsecured. There is a junior debt or subordinated debt. Then there's a CB, and then there is perpetual. Okay, and when you look at the yield, it is true that the yield, this is lowest, this is a little higher, this is even higher, and the perpetual is probably the highest. But for some reason, the CB, they pay a lower coupon. Now, that is not because the yield is lower. Okay, now the coupon is lower. You have to understand the difference between coupon and yield. So here I said I pay you for a vanilla bond, okay? So I pay you a 5% coupon, 5% coupon. And if the yield was 5%, this is just a vanilla bond, okay? It will be priced at par. So for CB, something different is going on. So for CB, you may get a 3% coupon. The yield is still 5%, but you get a call option. And that call option represents the difference between the coupon rate, I should say, that you are paying and the difference, okay? So that 2% actually pops up elsewhere. So, the yield might be low, the coupon might be lower, but the yield is actually still going up, okay? So you have to understand, instead of just using this kind of one-dimensional relationship, as you go down the balance sheet and you go up in yield, you have to understand the CB is a little bit different because there's something else inside, okay? Oh, this is the last page of questions. I can't believe it. And we've already done this. We've done that already. Back-to-back confirmation letter. Lecture 2. Is this lecture? What page? Page 20. Oh, the big boy letter. Don't worry about the back-to-back. Okay? Just confirmation. This is confusing. The big boy letter is this. So in law, there is a concept called reliance, and the opposite of that is non-reliance. Now, this is something that describes the contractual relationship between two parties. In this case, the buyer and the seller. Okay. Now, what does reliance actually mean? Reliance means, so I have a transaction with you, but we do not have equal knowledge. We do not have equal expertise, and I rely on you. You have more information than me. Okay? So in the future, if something goes wrong, because of something that you should have told me, but you did not, I can take action. That's reliance. Okay? Now, another example, which might be easier for you to think of, is when you go and visit a doctor when you are sick. Okay? You are entering into a contractual relationship with the doctor. There is reliance there because he knows more than you, right? And if in the future something went bad or there's something he should have told you and he did not, you can say there's reliance there and you can actually complain and you can sue them. I would say that even teacher-student relationship, there's reliance there. Non-reliance is the opposite. Non-reliance is I declare that we have equal expertise and I promise you that I will not take action in the future because of something that you haven't told me. That's the big boy letter. Now, you might wonder, why, if you're an investor, why do you sign that? Okay. You might get better pricing. That's it. You don't sign a big boy letter, I charge you more. You sign it, okay, I'll give you a cheaper price. So it's all about negotiations. Okay. Now we have around 10 minutes, and I am going to spend this 10 minutes explaining to you how do hedge funds invest in CBs, okay? And I think you have to have an understanding of this, not just for this midterm, don't worry about the midterm, but as a future professional, this is something that you should pay attention to. Now, first of all, the first thing I would say is that hedge funds are almost always a very important investor in the convertible bond market. So I would say every time there is a convertible bond that comes out, they would account for at least 30%, 40%, sometimes even more. Okay, so hedge funds really like to invest in CBs. Number one, okay. Hedge funds like to invest in CBs. But they invest in CBs for different reasons than now. There are dedicated CB funds out there with more traditional mutual fund type companies like Templeton or Fidelity. Now, they might invest in CBs for different reasons. So one interview question potentially can be, okay, pretend I am Fidelity and I am running a dedicated CB fund, then how would you sell your product? And you would say things like, well, it's a bond, so you may get principal back at the end, and there's some income, and then you also enjoy, the upside of equity when there is upside. Okay. Now, hedge funds, they invest in quite a different way. Okay. I mean, okay, you get income, but you have to look at what are the risks in a CB. And I already said to you that there is the interest rate risk. There is also the equity risk. Now, we actually discussed this earlier. So there is there's the credit spread to start with, and then together with the risk-free rate. So that together will make up your yield. Now, this part you can hedge. Now, there's the equity risk. That is just purely the stock price going up and down. Okay. And the last part is the volatility. So the sigma can go up and down. Now, for hedge funds, all right, when they buy a CB, usually they are interested in trading this part. What does that mean? That means you buy an option and the option price is now $7.45, priced at a volatility of 25. But the moment this changes to 30 and nothing else has changed, okay? Your option price has changed. This is how hedge funds like to trade CBs. Okay, they like to trade volatility. They don't want any exposure with equity risk. They also don't want, sometimes they keep the interest rate part, but they certainly don't want this part. Okay, now, if you have an investment and it contains equity risk, and you don't want to have that, what do? You try to short sell. Okay? Now that is why it is so important when you are an issuer, when you issue a CB, you need to try to consider whether it is actually easy or not to short sell your stocks out in the market. If it is not easy to short sell, hedge funds won't be interested, or they will not be as interested. Okay? If it's very, very easy to short sell, now when they short sell against your company, it's not because they have something against your company. No, it's not. It's because they want to get rid of the equity exposure. Okay? So it's important that they are able to short sell, which actually is why in the Country Garden transaction, so this page is just telling you what I've been saying so far. Okay? So in a Country Garden transaction, they really, really try very hard. When I say they, I mean the issuer tries very hard to make sure that the hedge funds are able to short sell. And the way they do that, so here's a bond. So the hedge fund will buy the bond, and so they need to short sell. Okay, and the way you can short sell is you need to borrow from an investor somewhere else. Now, this is what normally happens. That's why I call it the generic case. This is what you normally do for short selling. Now, in the case of Country Garden, it's a pity we don't have enough time because I'd love to talk about this all day. And I can talk about it all day. Ideally, what you can do is that Country Garden can lend the shares to the hedge fund or let them borrow the shares. Okay, so that's one way of doing it. And sometimes issuers, they do actually do that. Now, the other way is that the iBank can provide some help to lend them the shares. Okay? And then they need to borrow, they need to get the shares from the market. That's another way. Okay? Now, what happens in the case of Country Garden is Merrill Lynch actually is helping the hedge fund. So Merrill Lynch is lending them the shares, and then Country Garden is helping Merrill Lynch with the hedge. Okay, now that is the equity swap that's behind it. Okay, so that's how the whole thing hangs together. So there are different components. Component number one, or aspect number one, is the hedge fund needs to short sell. Component number two is that the investment bank is actually assisting with that. Component number three is that the issuer is also helping Merrill Lynch. So Merrill Lynch is just sitting in the middle with offsetting sides of the trade. Okay. Now, I think, to be honest, if you understand the first part of what I said, which is why do issuers care so much about whether investors can short sell? If you understand that part, and you understand the need for them because they just want to trade the volatility. If you understand that, I think that's already quite okay. The Country Garden case I think if you understand what equity swap means, that's the key part. You need to understand what an equity swap is. And I think I told you what an equity swap is earlier, in fact. I might have skipped, yeah, here. Okay. So in your notes, I already written down some details on what an equity swap is. So you can read that. It should be quite simple. Correspondingly, I also explain in here what a call spread is. I think one of you actually asked me. Let's see if this is enough. A call spread is when you issue a CB, which is a normal CB, so the conversion strike may be 125% of the current stock price. Let's just say that is the case, okay? But you don't actually want to issue a CB with that strike. You prefer to issue a CB with a strike of, let's say, 150. The problem is no one is going to buy that in the market. No one is interested because they think it's too far away. So what you do is you issue a CB just like this. So investors are happy, and then you turn around. You mean you are the company, okay? You go into the market and you buy this call and you sell another one. So the net effect would be as if you actually issued a CB with a strike of 150%. So you can look at the diagram here, okay? So this is what you've done. So this is your CB, strike at 125%. You go to the iBank, you buy that, and you sell them another one. Now, maybe you're thinking, why do that? Is that just for fun? Isn't it just a waste of time? The first thing to say is that the issuer, they really prefer a CB where the strike is 150. Maybe they don't really want the conversion to happen. Then you're wondering, why sell the CB? Very good, because it's a lower interest rate, okay? I mean, it's not going to be a lot lower because this strike is so far away, but it will be lower, okay? Thank you, Eric. Give you some points for that. It's a lower interest rate, okay? And you might be wondering, well, what's in it for the iBank? Well, they're very good at things like that. Buying and selling options where it's far out of the money. Okay, I mean that's what they do, and they can earn some money while doing that as well. Okay. Now, okay, the question is for Country Garden's case, why did they issue a convertible bond instead of other bonds? First of all, from a commercial point of view, I think there are two ways you can look at it. If you are thinking about the psychology of a CB issuer, if I was a company, this is what I would be thinking. Number one is I want to borrow some money And one of two things can happen. So either I borrow at a lower interest rate, or I get to sell my stocks at a higher price. Okay? Now, so you have potentially two outcomes. And it's a question of which one you lean on. If your stocks are already very, very high, the price, okay, and you still issue a CB, probably you are thinking about the interest rate component, because there may not be a lot more room for the price to still go up. Right? So you are thinking, all right, and there are people who do that. The stock price is already up, through the ceiling, and they still issue. Now the other reason would be I want to issue some equity, but I don't want to do it at the current level. So I issue a CB and I set the strike price a bit higher. And I think this was what Country Garden did. So I think the most fascinating about CB is that there is a mixture of motivations. Precisely because there's a bond in there and you are short a call option. So the psychology has to be a mixture of these two. So for Country Garden, I think that's what they're thinking. And they were quite confident that the share price will go up. It turned out they were wrong. So I think there's a lesson that do not ever trust don't think that the issuer knows everything, okay? Even they can get it wrong. It's okay? Why can't they just do some equity fundraising? Because if you do that, then you will be selling shares at the current market price. And at the time when they were doing the issue, I think the price was quite depressed at that time. So you probably, when your stock price is very low, it's not really it's not a good thing to issue equity. So all of these things they have an impact on it. Anybody else? So yes. Yeah. I'm sorry. The articles. No. Although if you read them, you're going to end up helping yourself, but we won't ask you on the commercial details. No. It doesn't mean you can just ignore it, okay? That's not what I'm saying. Yeah. No. No, they won't be tested. Yeah. Yeah. What do you mean the weight of the weight of? Did you say that? I don't remember her saying that. Well, I will neither confirm nor deny it. I say just ignore that comment. Okay. Yeah, I don't remember her saying that actually. Yeah. Anyone else? Yes. tax call. I tell you what, if you want to leave, please feel free and I won't be upset. But for those of you who want to ask questions, just stay in your seat and then we will share the questions. But if you have an appointment or something you need to leave, please go ahead, okay? Tax call. Tax call is this. Now, tax call is normally to do with what's called withholding tax, and that is when an issuer issues a bond and is bought by an overseas investor. That is one example. Now, the bond will pay a coupon, let's say 8%, and sometimes, let's say it's a 5-year bond, and in the middle of it, so this is 0, this is 5 years, suddenly the government makes an announcement. Okay, from now on, all the bonds that are bought by overseas investors, we are going to tax them. So let's say there's a 20% tax, withholding tax, okay? So that means 1.6% will have to go to the government now, correct? Because 1.6% is 20% of 8%. Now, the investors are not going to pay that. They say, well, look, I bought this bond and I was expecting an 8% coupon. Now suddenly you pay me 6.4, no way, right? Now the issuer doesn't want to pay that either. So how are you going to resolve that problem? You resolve that if you have a tax call in your bond contract which says anytime when something like this happens, it's beyond our control, okay? If the government does something like this, then I'm going to call the bond back and pay you back your par amount, and then we just finish the transaction and then just forget about it. That's a tax call, okay? It does actually happen. So an example I can think of was, maybe not anymore, but a few years ago in Brazil, so being a big part of the emerging market, at that time the assets of Brazilian companies were really hot in demand, so much that a lot of investors went into Brazil and bought up all the bonds and this and that, and then the government got quite worried. It's called hot money, which no one really likes, okay? Because hot money can come and go just as quickly. Hong Kong has a lot of hot money, okay? But the government doesn't do anything because it is not the style or the policy of the government here to intervene. So there can be as much hot money as you want, but some governments like Brazil or maybe even China, okay, or Korea, for example, they do care. So they would impose, this withholding tax. So for new investors, they would have to pay, okay, for new bonds, but for the old ones, they would have this tax call provision, which will solve that problem of who's going to pay that tax. You don't have to pay because they're going to call the bond back and pay you back your par value. Is it okay? Yeah. Anyone else? Yes. Very good question. It's based on the issuer. Yeah. Whenever you buy something, It doesn't matter whether it's a vanilla bond or convertible bond, exchangeable bond, really, funky, straight out of the money, double knockout, whatever it is, okay, is the issuer. So because that is the entity you are giving money to, and you're going to be claiming from that. It's okay? Pre-IPO exchange, now that's a sexy instrument. Whatever it is, okay, think simple. It's whoever is the issuer. Okay, who are you giving money to? Who is going to pay you back the money? It's the credit risk of that entity. Okay. If you have a pre-IPO exchangeable bond, well, it depends on who's issuing it. It could be a major shareholder is issuing it in a private capacity. Okay, see you guys. Yeah. I don't mind if you want to leave. Okay. Then yes, the credit risk is on that major shareholder. Okay. Okay. Is everyone okay? So thank you so much for your attention. This video will be online in YouTube later today. There are two parts to it. So there's a part A and part B. Okay? Thank you for coming. It's much appreciated. In case anyone is going to listen to that. Now, first of all, let me explain to you what a callable bond is, because to understand make whole, you have to understand what a callable bond is. A simple callable bond, okay? Then I will talk about the make whole. All right. Now, a callable bond, let's say, is a 5 not call 3. So that means this bond, so let's say it pays a 3% coupon every year. 3% until year 5. And let's say you can call at par. So that means at year 3, or maybe beyond, okay, if it's American style, I can call this bond back, and in year 3, I will just give you 103, which is 100 plus your last coupon. That's a callable bond, okay? Now, what is make whole? Make whole is a little bit different. Make whole is not really a call option. Make whole is you have a 5-year bond, and it's 3% a year. Okay? And I have a make whole provision in year 3. Now, if I call this bond, I shouldn't say call, if I redeem this bond, okay, in year 3, I'm the issuer, okay? If I redeem this bond, I will pay you 103, but I will need to pay you the present value of that $6 that you were expecting. That's what make whole means. Okay? So for the investor, it's quite good, because in this case, you can see that you may actually miss out on a couple of coupons, even though you get your money back earlier. Okay? So typically, if you were to compare the two, the callable bond will probably need to pay you a little bit more. Let's say 3.2. Doesn't matter how much. I'm just making an example. okay, because of that call feature and the reinvestment risk that comes with it, okay? For make whole, if you buy a bond and there is a make whole provision, then you can guarantee that pretty much if you get your money back early, that's actually good news, because not only do you get your money back early, so you don't care if the issuer goes bankrupt, guess what? You don't miss out on the future payments. You still get them. Okay. I think in the American market, sometimes they do that. I'm not sure whether in Asian deals whether they do that or not. Okay. Now maybe you're wondering, why is the issuer so nice? Well, like everything I've told you all afternoon, they're not doing that to be nice. Okay. They do that because they feel they need to make their deal more attractive. Now, why do they do that? Maybe they are really shitty credit. Okay, so you do whatever you can to make the deal more attractive or to make investors more comfortable. You always do that. Okay, you wouldn't do that if you don't need to. Of course, you won't. Okay, so it's all about pros and cons, always. Okay. Anything else? It's okay? Wonderful. Oh, you're welcome.